republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A couple of announcements. Mrs. Rajat could not be here due to a family emergency, and we'd like to welcome Grace, and your last name is Perna? Grace Perna, who is our new student representative here on the board. And I also want to remind, we did hold an executive session at 6:30 to review the superintendent's midterm evaluation. Can I have a motion about the agenda? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Stevenson, all in favor? Okay, let's start off with Board of Education comments and reports. Grace, this is your first time. Do you want to make any comments, or do you want to hold off? It's up to you, or maybe we can go back to you after we've made our comments since it's your first time.
Yeah.
Okay. Mrs. Miller, go ahead, please.
Just want to welcome everybody back. Happy New Year. Want to welcome Grace officially. It's always nice to have, I feel like I have the best seat in the house sitting next to the student, so welcome.
I also want to welcome Grace. We're very excited to have you on the board, sitting here and providing your perspective and feedback. I also want to thank Dr. Robinson. I know you're very busy, but you came out this weekend. You made a lot of kids very happy to see you at the Junior FL Expo, opening the ceremony and kicking off. Really, it was a great day. 19 teams. We had teachers, principals, community members present. We had our high school robotics team there showcasing their stuff, and also the middle school robotics team. So it was a great event, first of many, I hope. We've had a long break, but I know that the administrators have been really busy. You can tell that we jumped right back into our meetings. We had a policy meeting last week. We went over the 8000 series policies specific to classroom instruction. The audit committee was yesterday, and I mentioned this just a short while ago. We went over the claims audit reports and risk assessment. We'll see those next month. Tomorrow we have IPAC. We're going to be hopefully celebrating passing these new classes later in the agenda, but also we're going over the process for the scoring and reporting of the future ready grants that have been submitted. We have a cultural diversity meeting coming up, and maybe you'll share a little bit more of that. And also, DIDIC is at the end of this month, so we have a lot on deck, and that's what I wanted to share for my opening comments. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Okay. Well, back to you. Just a couple things. Welcome, Grace.
I think it's the same.
I think Grace is either the third or fourth. Yeah. Each individual has been a very valuable person to be around. Yeah, your comments, your questions are valuable to us, and it provides us a lot of information. It helps us do our jobs better. So I welcome you, and I'm looking forward to your contribution.
Grace, no pressure.
Thanks.
The only thing I wanted to comment on was to relay a piece of information that came through the district superintendent from Capital Region BOCES. Apparently, obviously this is very early on in the legislative session, and already they passed a piece of legislation that relates to capital borrowing from BOCES to do various projects, and the ability to not just pass the costs of those projects on to the component districts, but the ability of the component districts now to treat it the same way they do their own capital debt, that is outside the cap. That was very welcome. I did not see specifics as to how that might be treated, in terms of how does that, what's the process that actually goes through. But as far as the changes in the law, it just seemed to be a simple change in the provision as to what is eligible to be excluded, if you will, from the tax cap and what isn't. And so now it's treated the same as any other capital debt. That really is very important. It's particularly important in our own BOCES because, unfortunately, nobody's trying to hide the fact that the facilities that the BOCES has have been basically inadequate for some time, whether it be special ed or career and technical centers, so forth. They are in dire need of not just repair, but in many instances, replacement. So the ability of the BOCES to work with the component districts and to fund these things is going to be critical. All of our kids will benefit. And I'm talking about Capital Region BOCES kids as opposed to just Shen kids. That's all I have.
The only thing I wanted to mention tonight, as we start, and you'll hear me talk about this every time I get to comment, is the Shenendehowa Education Foundation. Our Green and White Gala, our annual, will be on April 25th. We'll be at the Hilton Garden Inn again. We are going to have a theme this year. It's going to be Mardi Gras. So get your mask, get your purple tie, whatever, color it up. We're going to have a good time as we always do. But, this year we're actually having some good conversation around the board table about something that the whole community can really get behind. Because when you start to raise money or you're asking sponsors to stand behind you, you want them to sink their teeth into something that is going to give back to the community. And it's always something, if you look around Clifton Park, what we have done, the Carillion Bells started as what? They found antique bells. They're here in Gowanus, wasn't it?
Did we store them here?
We stored them here. And look what, that came about from that. We're looking at some really good topics centered around the community, the students. So we're going to continue to vet that out and hopefully come out with an idea by the next meeting. I think we're going to spend the next meeting just talking about that. But I want to raise awareness on it. I want everybody to start, thinking about going to the event. It's a great event, and if anybody has any other ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. And also, we are actively looking for a treasurer of the foundation. So if anybody knows of anybody. So thanks.
Okay.
I have three things. First, I would like to highlight how he communicated Dr. Robinson's performance on his mid-year evaluation. We're very positive about the direction of the district and where we're going. At the end of this meeting, we're going to vote on 4 additional classes. Not only are we bringing in classes, but we're accelerating the pace at which we can bring classes. And that's just one of the things we're doing. So I think we're in very good hands. We're in very good direction. We want to make sure that everybody understood that. Next topic is what we're seeing from the state. Mr. DeLallo mentioned a couple things. Every time I look in the paper, there's 2 things that are sort of creating a chill in my stomach. One is, we're talking to the state about major modifications to the graduation standards. And we're also talking about a $6 billion shortfall within the state of New York. $8 billion? Okay, thank you very much for the update.
I live it every day, that's why.
What this means is, ever since the Common Core piece faded and some other things faded, over the last couple of years, I think districts had a lot of autonomy to govern well. Other than tightness of money, there was not a lot of confusion on standards and things. Well, it seems like this period of autonomy for us may come to an end with both of these things out there. We need to be aware of it. But hopefully things can get cleared up. Hopefully graduation standards will become a good policy that's well communicated. That's 2 separate things. And also the money thing is something that we typically do very well as a district. I think we will continue to do well, but when there's just not a lot of any money, it is a challenge for us to keep things rolling. So I think that the time of having a good feeling about autonomy may be ending, and we have to be wary of that. Final thing is policy. I was very encouraged on the policy meeting we had that Mrs. Hoffman mentioned. One of the things that came up on our BYOD policy is we've had this for a couple of years, and I've left a conversation. The final comments we made on this is that this is a great policy to review with students. Our current BYOD policy talks about 3G, BlackBerry, modems and routers and things that are obsolete, okay? Language like that creates a sense that this isn't a relevant policy. But just as important, there's a lot of struggling at all parts of this district on what I call use versus abuse. And I remember this because when email first came out, that's how old I am. But when email came out, people were like, what do I do? Well, you really have to say to yourself and to the people around you, it's use versus abuse. And people do that every day in families and schools. And there just needs to be an understanding of there's certain practices and norms that people bring forward. And I think it's getting better. But that's something we really want to learn from students. What's really going on there? So Grace will try to mention it and bring it back to you in terms of when we go through the first reading about how we really would like to get some input back from the state. students. And you got some great students to work with in the school to help you out. So, that's it for me. I'll turn it over back to public comments. So, go ahead,
Can I
please.
just comment on one of your things? Bob?
Absolutely.
And I know Dr. Robinson will, I'm sure, talk to this as we get going into the month of March, but you indicated the $8 billion deficit. I mean, it touches everything that we do in New York State. And I'm sure, because I did hear the governor say that you might be looking at the local cities and counties for that extra aid too, which would, we talk about this, and I know we're poised in a very good position because we always thought, we never take anything for granted. So I'm sure you can, Dr. Robinson, talk to this a little bit more. I mean, we see how the budget rolls out. He says a lot of things up front, and then it all depends on what ends up in the state and in the assembly, in the books of business. But yeah, it's just something we really need to keep our eye on because it could do some damage if it goes forward. So.
Can I also jump in also, Bob? I do wonder if we should talk amongst ourselves as a board in our retreat about use versus abuse of BYOD and how we deal with that as a board.
Okay.
I mean, I think it could be a topic that we deal with because we have children, we're in the community. I think that it's something to think about.
Yeah. And these policies aren't coming to the board until next month. So, yeah, they're reviewing it. So now's a good time to look at it.
Okay. Good. Grace, we had a couple of people jump in. Anything you want to add since we're on there?
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the welcome. I think the only thing that I really wanted to comment on was just the BYOD policy. So I've heard a lot of things just through both just students and because of the recent coffee talk that Senate had, a lot of things just about Wi-Fi in general. So it's going to be good to look over that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right. We'll now turn it over to residents to make public comments.
Yeah.
So if we
We
can
have
have,
students
do you have
from
students? A couple
Senate.
of students should be here, and then folks
Yeah.
after the students, but I'll read the standard language. It's an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. Any residents in attendance, the board will not address specific comments, but ask for name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. So complete the comment form. The board reminds residents that the public comment portion of the meeting is only one item of a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be as succinct as possible and the remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We would also expect residents to speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to monitor proper civility and decorum for our students. We will not allow disparaging, inflammatory, or accusational comments about any school personnel or students during public comments. Residents may also contact the board via email at bo@gn.org. All questions coming to the Office of Public Information are...
Shen Schools, Shen Schools, Shen
We had
Schools.
shenschools.org. Sorry for that. Thank you for the correction. All questions coming to the Office of Public Information Officer are shared with the board and the superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns typically addressed by the superintendent and our designee. So go ahead, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
to introduce myself again, I'm Joyce Rue. I'm a current junior from SFA Senate. Unfortunately, Elena could not make it tonight because of the drama. But as Grace mentioned, the Senate did have our first coffee talk of the year in December. Although we talked about issues with Wi-Fi, a big topic that was also discussed was scheduling, with blocking that's hopefully to come. So students, especially our sophomores, were really interested in that. Aside from our December plans, the Senate just started our planning with 2 of our March events, one being our annual dodgeball event, and the other being a new event that we're planning to bring back, which is Day of the Arts, where we're hoping to incorporate student interest with our music and art programs. So we're very excited for both of those events.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you, Vina.
Did a booking party that which sensational somehow, somewhere.
Any other comments?
Residents.
Residents, come on up, please.
I am not a resident, as most of you know, but I am a member of the STA, and I have copies of my prepared statements here. Give everybody a chance to, can I count tonight? Sometimes I can't count.
We have
A short one?
No, we have enough.
Fair enough. Okay, good. For those of you who don't know me, I am Ann Moore. I am here tonight as a member of the STA Executive Board, the Shenendehowa Teachers Association Executive Board, and specifically I am Vice President for High School Affairs. I wish to discuss discuss, and it's appropriate since has already been discussion, I wish to discuss changes to the to the Board of Education Policy and Regulation 8140 and 8140R, which is known as the BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device policy. The STA requested the opportunity to make comments at a policy review committee meeting. As a matter of fact, Heidi Steinbreckner attempted to attend the December meeting and was asked to leave. And in a memo dated December 16, 2019, Dr. Robinson and Mr. Presley directed the STA to make comments about Board of Education policies under review during the public comment section of the Board of Education meetings. I make my comments here tonight following that directive. The BYOD policy was adopted in June of 2013, and the regulation most recently reviewed in April of 2015. The policy itself was revised in April of 2016. I mention these dates specifically because they are all prior to the one-to-one rollout of Chromebooks in the district. This rollout occurred during the 2018-2019 school year at the high school. Originally, the purpose of the policy was to permit teachers the latitude in having students use their own technology to, and I am quoting the policy here, gather, evaluate, and report on information and ideas, conduct research, solve problems and/or answer questions in a collaborative format, analyze and create print and non-print materials. As I just said, all the items I have listed are included in the current policy and are academic pursuits. They can now easily be accomplished on the district-provided Chromebooks. Unfortunately, students and parents at the high school have, over the years, interpreted the BYOD policy as giving them the right to have and use cell phones in any manner they choose, in or out of the classroom, academic or not. The unintended consequence is the loss of educational and planning time addressing the inappropriate use of phones in class, oftentimes despite classroom policies that mirror the BYOD policy. Administrators at the high school spend a disproportionate amount of time on issues created by the inappropriate use of phones and social media. These situations often take days or weeks to remedy and have been known to require police involvement, a situation exacerbated by the anonymity of the internet. The enactment and interpretation of the BYOD policy has been inconsistent across grade levels and between buildings. Consequences for student violations are also inconsistently applied. Students in my classes have thanked me for not permitting them to have their phones out and available to them. They report being less distracted and being able to follow what's occurring in class more easily. Additionally, they tell me their Chromebooks are sufficient for most classes. The STA requests the following modifications to the current policy. Number one, a clear statement that keeps phones and other personal devices, things like smartwatches and those kinds of things, out of academic areas unless specifically permitted by a classroom teacher. Provide clear direction on student consequences for bringing and using devices in class when not requested by the teacher. Enforce discipline for students who use their phones for a prohibited use, especially audio or videotaping students, faculty, or staff without their permission. And finally, streamline the language in the policy to reflect the change in availability of devices since the one-to-one rollout of Chromebooks. The STA is happy to continue a discussion of Policy 8140 and Regulation 8140R. This policy and regulation are a daily headache for most of us who are in the classroom. We believe our members can help the district administration and the Board of Education craft language that will benefit all stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you have any other public comments? I see someone else coming up. Okay. So at this point, let's move over to Superintendent's report.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the board's comments. While it was an executive session, it was my evaluation, so I guess I have the right to publicly say thank you very much for your supportive comments. And I mentioned to the board, and I say this recognizing we have a lot of staff in the audience, that the support of the board is instrumental to the success of the district. And we can't take that for granted, that we have 7 people who commit a tremendous amount of time and thought into ensuring that we do the right things and always keeping the best interests of students at the focus of what we do. So public, I want to say thank you for your continued support as we sit here 15 years later when the board thought it was a good decision to hire me. And hopefully we'll still sit here 15 years after this and still think it's a good decision. So thank you very much for that. Just a few things I want to highlight that were mentioned here. This is a season for advocacy, and typically we start gearing up for the state legislative process in November and December, trying to highlight what we think our priority area is going to be. And we shared last time with the board a document, and it's going out this week because of the holiday season. Try not to send stuff out because it gets lost in the pile of mail that people don't pay attention to until they return. So this week we are sending those advocacy pieces out to our legislative leaders. I also had the fortune of meeting with Shelley Meyer, Assemblywoman Meyer, who's the chair. She's on the Senate side. But either way, she's one of our legislators. She's the chair of the Education Committee, representing Yonkers, and former teacher, and so she certainly understands the significance of decisions being made by the governor and the legislature related to education aid, and certainly while she sympathized with the situation for many school districts, there's a recognition that the state has to do something different with the overall funding of education, because we have some gross inequities in funding of education across the state. We are fortunate as a school district. I often say that we're the quintessential perfect middle class district. We're too rich to be poor, too poor to be rich. And little the data says that the state has a marker, combined wealth ratio marker, that 1 is the center point, and if you're above 1, you're considered more wealthier. If you're below 1, you're considered less wealthy. We always, Shen, as a school community, always fluctuate right around that 1 point, which is where we want to do. And that has afforded us in past years to weather some of these storms when you have huge downturns or ebbs and flows in state funding. I anticipate this year will be one of those situations again because of some of the dynamics happening at the federal level that's impacting New York's revenue, particularly on the Medicaid side. So we're watching that very closely. So that's the one thing. The letter's going out to those folks. We already started having conversations with legislative leaders, informally and formally otherwise. The second piece I'm going to share with the board, there are 2 opportunities for the board to engage in what we call our roundtable visits with our legislators. The New York State School Board Association has what they call a Capitol Conference on February 9th and 10th. I think in the past, Mr. Delalo has attended that conference, and not necessarily suggesting that we attend the conference itself, but possibly try to, if it's not too late, maybe possibly schedule some visits of our legislative leaders, possibly on the 10th, which would be that Monday, if I'm not mistaken, calendar. A second opportunity is the New York State Council of School Superintendents. We have our legislative visits scheduled for March 3rd. And again, I'm sharing it with the board for you to think about a little bit, and during this week I'll send out a little poll, so to speak, to see if there's one. We need to see what's the availability. So Mrs. Ford will start contacting offices to see if any of those dates will be better for most board members to attend, because it's always nice when we show up in a mass of 4, 5, 6, 7 board members to meet with our legislative leaders. So those are 2 dates that I'm contemplating right now to actually do our visit of the LOB. Yeah, so more to come on that. Related to that, we are hoping by the end of the week that the governor will issue his budget. A lot of speculation that it may happen by the end of the week, if not first part of next week. And that's a real trigger because it's when we start to see what's real based upon the budget language. And if you recall, if you've been in New York long enough and followed New York politics, who knows, probably about 10 years or so ago, laws were changed that basically the governor dictates the process by the language that he actually used in the bill language for his budget proposal. And essentially both the Senate and Assembly, they start to say, okay, you have that, but we want this. And so the governor's budget kind of dictates the process. And so we're looking to see what that language is going to be, particularly surrounding foundation aid, to see if it's going to be a situation where they're going to try to really stabilize the formula, or is it going to be a formula robbing from Peter to pay Paul? which is concerning for us because we don't want to have to be in a situation where as a school district, we see reductions in funds in order for someone else to see additional funds. And on the same note, if someone needs additional funds, there needs to be a way to provide additional funds so students have equity in opportunities for quality educational pieces. So that's going to be the piece we're going to watch towards the end of the week. Another big piece, and Mr. Presley pointed out to it, Dr. Wood and myself, and I would imagine probably maybe some other administrators, will be, I think it's January 26th, I think that's the date. The Board of Regents doing statewide, quote-unquote, roundtable discussions surrounding graduation requirements. So we'll be going to the Saratoga BOCES on January 30th that's the closest one to us, to listen, to participate, to contribute. We'll see I'm not sure how the format's going to be. Hopefully it's beneficial to be able to contribute to that dialogue. Related to that, I'm also with some other organizations we're having, and in fact, hopefully on this Friday, with the interim commissioner, I guess that's the title now, we'll be having some direct conversations about graduation requirements. Again, one is to try to get some sense of truly what's the intention of the Board of Regents. It's great that we can have these great community conversations across the state. The question is, are we really looking to make changes or just window dressing? And I think the time is right and ripe for the state to really start thinking about what does the next generation education actually looks like, feels like, and translate to what's the quality education we want to have the class of 2030 and beyond to have, and rightfully so it should change because things have changed significantly. We even made reference to policies tonight that were great once upon a time, and now as technology changed, how do we make the adjustments? So we'll be attending that session as well. And the last piece, just want to mention, we're gearing up. Mrs. Hoffman mentioned diversity. It's kind of interesting and surprising to believe that 10 years now we've been doing sensational. This is the 10th anniversary, and I bring it up because I was reflecting recently, thinking about when our first sensational session 10 years ago. Think about the demographics of this school district in this community 10 years ago to the demographics of this community now. Significantly different. And yet it may not appear that way because things have evolved almost seamlessly. And I think we're fortunate as a community because we've seen in some communities when demographics start changing, a lot of tension happens because of people not being as culturally sensitive or culturally appreciative. And I think in many ways, I want to give, I think as a school system, we have been the gateway to that by some of the things that we do here in our systems, where our kids are coming into environments where different perspectives, different philosophies, different ethnicities, different cultures, you name it, for the most part, I'm not saying that we don't have situations where we have hiccups, but are embraced. And I think so we've been modeling that, and sensational has been one of those pieces. And so we're looking forward to 10 years of this and celebrating the tremendous wealth of our community. So one of those things to mark our calendar, that's going to be the end of March. I think March 22nd is the date on that, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I get the dates to you. It's the Saturday after the Superintendent's Conference Day. So pretty exciting times as we look to go into the second half of the school year. And the last note is just so interesting that the board will be asking to approve the contract for SPAC tonight. And it's a scary thing because it's almost like you feel as if you're at the top of the slide, and the minute you sit down, that slippery slope, it happens so fast. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're doing SPAC, and next week is Regents Week and so kids in Regents, and 2 weeks after that it's February break, a month after that is April break, a month after that is Memorial Day, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, wow, what happened? And so for me, it's like a scary proposition because we have a laundry list of things they say we want to do. And ironically, it always happens, it always works out. Things happen, things take place, kids have great experiences. But it's just kind of like, as we kind of do, people have resolutions to say, I want to do. We don't have resolution, we have dictates we must do, because the slope doesn't stop as we go from now till June. So pretty excited, a lot of excitement coming into 2020, and certainly this graduation season is going to be pretty significant when you think about, one, it's the class of 2020. It's you start a new decade, and personally for me, it's become official empty nester.
Yes.
In that sequence. So I share those kind of personal perspective, because I think that sometimes when we are sitting here, we talk about things, it can be very academic, but at the end of the day, the decision that we make and the things that we talk about has a profound impact on the 10,000 beautiful minds that we try to educate every day. And so I share it as a part of, Happy New Year, welcome back piece of it, just to put things in perspective, because I think that perspective is so important. So we can debate differences in rules, policies, regulations, but what we should never debate is the focus on trying to ensure that the students that we serve, their experience drives everything that we do. And so hopefully we can continue to do that well. So thank you for the evaluation, and we'll see where the legislative season goes and put up a good fight and advocate on behalf of our community, and hopefully come back with some good news to move the needle forward.
Okay.
Mr. DeLamo.
I just wanted to comment relative to the Capitol Conference. While I certainly agree with the idea that participating in the actual lobbying effort that goes with that is usually not the best use of your time, because it's just an overwhelming number of people, and you don't really get to voice your situation. I would urge you to go to the conference itself, because it gives you exposure to all of the most significant budgetary and legislative issues. And while you can never really and truly depend on a politician to give you full candor, you get closer to it when they're speaking to a smaller crowd. They will address educational issues and so forth in that environment. So I think it's good preparation. But I think we're far better off going as a district. They want to hear about the rationale behind the legislation, but what they really want to hear, somebody said all politics is local. Well, hey, that's absolutely true. They want to know how it's going to impact you, because you are where the people live that are voting for them or against them. So they want to please you if they can. So you need to make a good statement, a strong statement as to why this is important to you and how it's going to impact your district.
So you're advocating for the 9th and the 10th? That conference?
So I'll share the information out, so you
Okay.
can look at it and see if it's, one, if the time would work. Two, hopefully there's an agenda you kind of look at and say, is this the best use of the time? So I'll share that out
Okay.
with everyone.
But still, the one that's on March 3rd is the one where the
Yeah, so
board goes and
yeah,
you
when we
meet
do our
with our-
visits.
our-
And it could be March 3rd, and quite frankly, we're going to call around and see if there's some better dates. We're going to get multiple dates and then try to share, and actually we do the opposite. Probably select some dates, send it out to you to hear some commonalities, and then try to see if our representatives are available on those dates. So thank you very
Okay.
much.
So done with superintendent's report, let's go to information items, policy procedures, first reading.
Good evening. So tonight we have several policies that are related to finance that I'm looking for, that I'm putting forth, for first reading. And these are from December's policy review meeting. Any questions?
So point of reference for Grace, how this works is we even put a schedule out ahead of time for what the respective policy committee is going to talk about. So if you are a stakeholder, whether you're a student, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an employee, whether you're a parent,
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the agenda.
we tell people ahead of time, we're going to talk about these things. So someone ahead of time can do just as we saw today, put together a letter saying, these are my concerns and this is what you want to think about. And that gets brought into the discussions. And then the second part is that after that group goes through and finds the document based on what they talked about, it gets shown to first reading, and this is the time people can review it and go over detail. And then at the following month, we then do second reading, which we vote on. So we are getting a lot of transparency, access points into that to have the discussions. Sometimes it's really good just to put in writing what immediately stands out to you as what you'd like to see addressed, because that helps the committee to focus the conversations on it.
I would say last year the Senate did that with the vaping and the bathroom detectors. I know that they were working with you on reviewing the policy and giving feedback.
Yep.
So it happened last year, and that's why.
Yes. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to consent items, treasurer report. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second. Mrs. Hoffman, any comments or questions? All in favor? Okay. And let's go to the minutes of December 10th. Motion on this one, Mr. Gilbert. Second. Can I get a second motion? Mrs. Miller, comments, questions? I think Mr. DeLallo, were you? Okay, so he was not present. Okay. All in favor?
I was standing here?
She was not
I don't think she was not
Yeah.
Well, she's not voted on this.
Okay.
So Mr. DeLallo stayed.
So the minutes passed with Mr. DeLallo abstaining. Okay, let's go to business items. First one is approval of additional ECA clubs, non-cash clubs, and classroom accounts for this academic year. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Miller, second. Mrs. Stevenson. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Second one is an extension of municipal cooperation agreement for diesel fuel and unleaded gas. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, second. Mr. DeLallo. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Third one, we have 4 bids, back to diesel fuel, unleaded gas, plus classroom office supplies, hot water tank removals and replacements, and 2-way radios. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second. Mrs. Miller, any comments, questions? All in favor? And item number 4, a change order for Mr. James M. Malloy, Inc. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. DeLallo, second. Mrs. Stevenson, any comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. Let's go to 5 and 6. We can combine these. We have a contract with Emerson College and another contract with TPC Training. Both, I think, are in the vein of professional development, something we do want to continue as much as possible. So can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, second. Mrs. Stevenson, any comments?
I do have a question. So the Emerson College one, it sounds like it's targeting, it's meant to benefit students. So the other one is actually for generative and
For staff.
emergency power training. So for 5, that one is meant for staff?
No,
Not
no,
for-
I'm sorry.
The Emerson College one?
The TPC is for
It's for staff, yes. That one's clear, yeah. So it appears that the Emerson College one is,
This is about student teaching supervision.
yeah. So is this an accredited course? And it is an accredited course.
Speech language.
So the contract went into effect November, so is it for this year?
Hold on, Mrs. Smiley, can you,
Oh, sorry.
thank you. Try not to have cross conversations.
So this was a bit of a unique situation this year. We had a speech language therapy student who requested to do an internship with one of our speech and language therapists, and probably because they're not a local institution, they wanted a contract in place. So we went back and forth and then got this approved, or worked on getting it ready for approval so that we could have this particular student teacher from this institution, who's a local person.
So it's for the student teacher to be here in the
Yes.
district?
Yes.
That's correct.
I see.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Moving on to number 7, the top of the slide, as Dr. Robinson referred to, the rental agreement for SPAC for graduation. Mr. Gilbert is off first nomination, Ms. Stevenson second. Any comments, questions? All in favor? And let's go to the last one. I think this got into local news, I think a month ago. A donation of CPR kits from American Heart Association, Albany Med, and Global Foundries. I can have a motion on this one. Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Hoffman, any comments, questions? All in favor?
I quickly wanted to add that Global Foundries actually has also donated to Team 20
Products.
at that same one. also Odyssey of the Mind, and the live streaming equipment for the high school,
Okay.
through PTA. So
Okay.
there was lots of good things that came through that grant award process.
With gratitude for
Gratitude,
all those
yes.
organizations. And one final one is scholarship and local donations. And can I get a motion on this one? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, let's go on to acceptance of special education placements and Mrs. Mylod.
Good evening. I have
evening.
recommendations from the Committee on Preschool and Special Education. for you tonight.
Okay, can I have a motion on this one? Mr. DeLallo, second Mrs. Hoffman. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay. And let's go on to personnel. We have two tenure recommendations. Mrs. Bush?
Yes, we have two teachers who are eligible for tenure, completing their probationary appointment. They are what we would call off-cycle because of when they were hired. The first one is not here with us tonight. She's a special education teacher at High School West, Amy Sheldon. Her tenure was written by Mr. Augustinoni and Mr. Gutschel, and the only reason she's not here is because she's a new mom. Otherwise, she would have been here. But she really engages our students. She collaborates with her co-teachers, and she is very highly regarded at High School West for the everything that she does in the special education department and as far as the community service. Our other teacher is here tonight, Sheila Macedo. Sheila, if you'd stand up. Sheila is being recommended for tenure by Jill Floria and Sarah Chaffee, English as a new language. Sheila, what Mrs. Chaffee and Mrs. Florio wrote was, she's a wonderful addition to the Scano community. Her willingness to participate and support Scano events is noteworthy. We are fortunate to have her as a genuine, kind, and caring member of our community who demonstrates a love of children on a daily basis. She also has worked with TISAGO, and they have similar sentiments. Just Mrs. Florio was the author of the tenure rec. So those are the two tenure recommendations that I'd like to bring forward tonight.
Congratulations.
Can I make a motion?
Can I have a motion on both tenure recommendations? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much.
And I have one retirement that I'd like to
Sure.
recognize. Karen Tremblay is a computer lab aide who is retiring after 20 years from the high school, and her retirement date is March 5th. So that's the only retirement tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions on staffing recommendations, both what's presented here as well as the transportation? Can I get a motion on this one? Motion, Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Hoffman. All in favor? Okay, thank you. And back to policies. This is the second reading. So this is what we talked about first reading previous month. So we've had a month that people can look at this and then provide further clarification.
So the policies that we're presenting tonight for second reading and approval are from we presented them in December, for first reading, but November's policy review meeting. Questions?
And these ones are specific to board governance. So.
Okay, can I have a motion on all of these? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor?
Thank you.
And let's go on to instruction. We have approval of several courses. These were presented last month. So can I have a motion on accepting all of these? Mrs. Hoffman and Mrs. Miller second. Any comments, questions on the courses?
I would love if the financial literacy class was, everybody had to take it. I think that's just a good life skill that every kid should have, not even have an option, you just got to take that. So I'm excited about that one too.
Yep.
And they have them right now ready for, they're already in the books.
Mhm.
So they can schedule them next year.
All in favor? Okay, motion passes. We now have the opportunity to go back to public comments. Anybody out there want to make public comments? We did table something within the board as far as, I think, discussion on a visit to schools in the middle of the year.
Mid-year.
Mid-year, okay. Would
Like
you
we
like
do.
to
Yeah,
speak to
sure.
that?
I think we talked about it in the beginning of the year. I think we talked about it at the end of last year that we'd like to see that. So in the beginning of every year, as many people know here, we all get together and we take a trip through each of the schools. It's an opportunity to see what's going on and what happened over the summer, right? And say hi to the teachers for the new year and see the students and see what's going on in the buildings. I think it would be a good conversation point right now to have going through it a second time, right? Because school is underway now, what's going on, it's a good touch point, mid-year touch point to walk through and get some highlights in the different areas.
Do we have proposed dates?
Tomorrow?
So I guess the time of the day, in the past, we always started in the morning and by 11:30, 12 o'clock, it's not a school without a walk-in. So I'm assuming that's a similar structure that you're
Yeah.
proposing?
It would be.
Okay, so what we'll probably do a doodle poll then. So try to see what dates are out there, and being mindful also of weather and having a quote-unquote snow day alternative in case we have one of those nasty days that we don't have once in a while here. So we'll do that. So we'll send out a doodle poll, two things for this, and also then for the legislative visits. And we mentioned a mid-year retreat, so choosing a board meeting. And I look at the schedule that we don't have an executive session planned for something. For instance, we have negotiations, conversations coming up for CSCA, probably maybe that one of those February meetings. We have a meeting tomorrow Thursday with our labor attorneys. So I look at that and then propose maybe in file the bulletin a date for, or dates for after referring to you for mid-year retreat as well.
Okay. All right, anything else? Go ahead, Mr. DeLallo.
We're talking about the review of the various kinds of technology. I would like to make sure that when the committee looks at this, that they look very carefully at bullet point 3 of the STA's recommendations there on modification. That one talked about prohibiting the use of audio and video taping of students, faculty members, staff without their permission. I fully understand and support there are instances or places where privacy is an issue. Bathrooms, locker rooms, no question. I'm not so sure that I would support the prohibition of the use of cameras and video in a classroom. It's not a private environment, and quite frankly, it has proved to be useful to us in our accountability situation, and without that, we might not have a leg to stand on. If nothing else, it can be a source of causing people to use a little bit of constraint and a little more self-discipline, whereas without it, they might feel more liberated and in an inappropriate manner. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? If not, we'll go to policy review. I think we've already mentioned that, and that's also on the website. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Hoffman, second, Mr. Gilbert. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's the